Hamilton. How are you?
Greetings, Michel.
Very happy to meet you in California.
Yes, very nice to be here.
It is fantastic to visit again California. So, you are just finishing a book, very interesting book, and this book is related to our major subject, which is innovation.
Yes.
So, could you just tell us a little first what is your journey in life, and then what is your book about and the connection with innovation?
Yes, I'd be delighted to do that. So I have spent my career as a practicing business strategist, and that's really taken me down three paths that are different but all very related and all tie back to my knowledge of strategy. I've advised companies for years. I founded a consulting firm which I ran for decades. I am an active equity investor, and so I use the understanding of strategy to assess companies. Yes. And then finally, I teach strategy at Stanford University. So that's been my history as a strategist.
Thank you very much. And we are very happy to have your insight about innovation, because Standford, of course, is one of the leader school about innovation, startup. So what is the connection with the 7 powers, that is the title of your book, 7 powers and innovation?
So, to answer your question, let me give you just a very brief story. Last spring, I was giving a speech to maybe 100 CEOs of startups in Silicon Valley. And at the end of the speech, I said, how many of you have a strategy for your company? And almost nobody raised their hand. And then I also asked, how many think they should? And almost everybody raised their hands. And that describes in a nutshell the problem that for an innovator, they're involved, they have a lot of responsibilities. They have to keep their company growing, find funds and everything. And they often don't have time for strategy. And even if they did, they don't have the tools themselves that allow them to do it in the very high flux environment they face. And that's what my book is about, is to give them those tools.
Fantastic. So, could you give us an example of those 7 key powers?
Sure, I'd be glad to. So if you were a business, it's pretty simple. What you would like to have is you invest a lot in it, money, time, everything else, and you like something to come back to you. And the financial measure of that is cash flow. Okay?
Yes.
And so as a strategist, what you need to understand is what are those rare structures that when in place will lead to a long tail of good cash flow. Okay? And so, and those are the 7 powers. And so an example of that is scale economies. And that's a well-known one. Some of the ones of the 7 are less well-known than that. But scale economies create a situation in which a business, if it is larger than its competitors, has a lower cost position.
Yes.
And if they face the same prices, that translates into higher profits and better cash flow.
So more the company grow, more the barrier is important, and more the cash flow is important. So that is typically something that any startup should look at to have a possible growth.
Yeah, so for a startup scaling, they're in this period often of very rapid scaling. And that is a decisive moment for scale economies, because if in that period you gain ascendancy over your competition, then when the market becomes more mature, you have all that you need to defend that.
Yes.
But if you miss that chance, it's gone forever.
Yeah.
And so in that moment, you need to be able to understand what it is you need to strive for.
So what could be other, that was your first power, right. The scale, so the second type.
Let me give you one more example of the 7 powers, and that's one that's much more unusual, called counter-positioning.
Yes, very interesting.
So if you think back on...
scale is quite well known, but counter-positioning is near to be an invention of yourself.
That's correct, that's correct. This is a concept that I invented because I observed a lot of competitive dynamics that were not properly explained by the current constructs. And so counterpositioning was one that I developed, and it turns out that it's quite frequent and very important. And it's frankly, maybe because of invention, it's one of my favorite sources of power. Yes. Because it's one that an upstart can overcome a very powerful incumbent. Would you like me to give you an example?
Yes.
It's very simple, Michel. Counterpositioning takes place when, if you are a newcomer, you create a new business model, and you take on me who's a large incumbent in a space. But your business model is so contrary to what I do that if I were to copy your model, it would destroy my business. So I don't do it. So your business model just keeps getting going and growing and growing, and I just don't do anything. And so there are many cases of that, and it's.
Is it the case of Kodak, for example?
No.
With the digital camera?
No, it's different with Kodak because what happened with Kodak with digital cameras was that in fact there was no attractive alternative for them. There was nothing that they could do. They knew about digital photography. They invested a great deal of money in it, but there was no position. Remember, they were a film company, not a camera company. And the analog to film and digital is semiconductors, and Kodak had no business being a semiconductor company, so there's no place for them to go. But I'll give you another example that is counterpositioning, which is the early days of Netflix.
Yes.
So imagine this little company that starts to send out DVDs by mail. And they have this gigantic competitor, very successful, very powerful, Blockbuster. Thousands of stores, the relationships with Hollywood, well known by everybody. But in this process, Netflix made the decision to do something that was very contrary to Blockbuster. They said, no late fees. If you bring back your DVD, send it in late, that's fine. You don't get charged extra. But it turned out that late fees accounted for a very large share of Blockbuster's income, maybe half. So Blockbuster looks at this and they go, I can't do that.
Yes.
Next year I'll have half as much income. So they waited and waited and waited. And finally they gave in, but it was too late. And that's classic.
Very interesting case. So, just could you name the scale of economy, network economy, counterpositioning, switching cost, branding, cornered resource. What is cornered resources?
So cornered resource is a concept that's known in economics, and it's just like it sounds like. You have a resource, and it's cornered. In other words, you have a control of it. And so for example, if you look at Pixar and you look at the director group of the original Pixar story team, this was a group of people that were incredibly able, but also had worked together during Toy Story 1 and 2, and then developed these bonds of trust and understanding, and that allowed them to go forward and produce many successful movies. And people would try to get them to go elsewhere. Other companies would try to hire them, and they would say, no, I really like it at Pixar. And so that's a critical resource for the success of the company because they produce compelling movies, but it was controlled by the company. So it's a cornered resource. The resource of the directors, the cornered is the fact that they won't go anywhere else.
Yes, I see. And so the last is process power. What is process power? That is the seventh one.
Yeah, so process power is rare. And so in business, if you are CEO of a business, or even just almost anybody in a business, you absolutely must spend a large percentage of your time on operational excellence. So every little improvement. So innovation with a small I. You know, you make the customer response a little better. You hire, this and that. So and that occupies a lot of your time, and rightfully so. But it does not result in power. And why is that? The reason is that somebody else can observe what you're doing and simply copy it.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so then the forces of competitive arbitrage take that out of the profit equation. Okay, so that's not power. In rare cases, there is something about those improvements that makes it very difficult for a competitor to mimic them. And it's one of two things, or they can be together. It's either excessively complex, so it just takes a really long time to do it.
Amazon, typically, the fact that Amazon are able to deal with thousands of books.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not convinced, but maybe that Amazon could be a good example. I would say
some people say that Amazon is not a digital company; it is more a process company, even.
It is
who deal with objects, you know,
right, and
more than any other company.
Yeah, and they've you know, they're on the forefront of robotics and warehousing and all these things. And I'm not totally convinced that Amazon has process power. I would say, for example, in the early days, in say the 1970s and 80s, Toyota was the Toyota production system. And so
total quality was
and
amazing process.
So amazing process, and the problem for a competitor was, first of all, incredibly complex. It goes into team structure and every little detail in the business, and so but also, so that's complexity. But the other barrier is opacity, which is Toyota themselves could not articulate exactly what was made up their system. So, so when they started a plant in Brazil or something, it wasn't, they just immediately became like, and then to give you an example of the process power
they have difficulty to compare themselves.
Yeah, they did, and so because it wasn't codified, it was in the fiber of the company. And so, for example, when General Motors formed a joint venture with Toyota called NUMMI. And Toyota was very open. This is how we'll do it and everything. And sure enough, the NUMMI plant, after a while, got up to the Toyota standards of quality. But GM still couldn't learn exactly how to mimic that. So now most companies have figured it out, but it took decades. So that's an example. But it takes a great deal of complexity. It's a rare source of power. And most of the times what you're looking at is just operational excellence, which isn't power.
Thank you, Hamilton.
My
See
pleasure.
you soon in another video about other subjects.
I will be very pleased, Michel, to do that.